everyone can come in and grab their seats, we can go ahead and get started. You want me to go ahead? You want me to wait? All right, if you'll take your seats. Gentlemen in the back, if you guys will take your seats, that'd be great. All right. So this next session, we are going to highlight the prevalence of large industrial loads and the associated risks in the Western Interconnection. And so we're going to discuss and try to gain some understanding around reliability impacts, as well as lessons learned and guidance that's coming out. So I'm really pleased to say that we have a number of folks, both online and also in the room. Steve Davis with SPP is here, and he is the manager of settlements and is responsible for all transmission settlements in the SPP region. He has served as a key contributor on SPP's Vanguard effort to develop policy, tariff language, and business practices surrounding high impact large load study and implementation. In addition to that, we also have two engineers from SPP online, Yasser and Mustafa. Yasser is a senior director, operations support, and Mustafa is a lead engineer in SPP planning organization, and they're currently active members in NERC's large load task. So we're excited to have that. In addition, we've got Fahad Ansari, who is going to lead the discussion. So with that, we'll kick this off.
Thank you, Kim. All right. This is Fahad Ansari, Senior Technical Advisor with Oversight Planning at WEC. So yesterday, with regard to large loads, at the general session, Katie and Enoch walked us through the difference between medium commercial load and large industrial load. They also walked through WEC stakeholder advisory group activities, highlighted risks associated with demand forecasting, modeling, planning, construction timelines, and also talked about the ERO enterprise efforts like the NERC Large Loads Task Force, Level 2 Alert, and other project teams working towards this effort. As mentioned in yesterday's session, large loads can have impact on the reliable operations of the BPS, particularly those connected directly to the BPS or those that in aggregate have a material impact on the BPS. We also learned that there is not a common definition for large load, nor there are requirements for the large load customers to register with NERC. So why are we going in detail today? Because the risk to the BPS is still there. And what we can do best is share knowledge. Southwest Power Pole, as an RTO, coordinates the flow of electricity over 72,000 miles of transmission lines and has made enhancement in their planning, operations, and market practices in response to large industrial load. Please join me in welcoming Steve Davis to present on this very important topic.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steve Davis. I'm happy and proud to represent SPP in this large load conference. Thank you, Mia. Thank you. We're super excited to be here today. We really appreciate the hospitality that we've all given and the great conference that you've all done. It's been a joy collaborating with the staff here, and my hope is to not disappoint. I know there's so many things we could talk about, and in the next 18 hours, we'll cover every detail. Nothing to worry about. Actually, in essence of time, it's kind of funny that we did this directly after lunch, outside in the sun. So What I would like to is make this as interactive as possible. We definitely have content. There's a lot of detail. We may not get through it all, but please, if you at any time have a question, we'll take time, let you ask the question, and we'll do our best to answer, okay? So we'll get through this together. It's all good, okay? So what is SPP's position on the large load? There we go. Technical difficulties. There we go. All right, first. So just real quick about SPP and our footprint. What you see here is a map of the current areas that we have and the areas that we're exploring. You'll notice the beautiful Pacific Northwest area where we've just launched our phase 2 for Markets Plus, which we're excited about, a day ahead market there. And we're excited to get the funding there and get that kicked off. What you see in the middle swath of America is our RTO current construct. You'll notice that we are on both sides of the interconnect. So what we're doing now is our RTO expansion effort. We've been central in the Eastern interconnection, but with the RTO expansion effort, we're expanding over the DC tie connection to be the first RTO in both sides of the geographic area. So we're excited about that, and we are on pace to go live there in April of 26. And with that, we would essentially have a footprint in 20 states, which we're super proud about. Now, I will skip through and in essence of time, because I know we have a lot of detail to get through. Some historical data about what SPP is right now, where we are with our generation and our load values. What we have is really 105,000 megawatts of nameplate capacity. 65,000 of that is accredited, basically to serve the firm load. Our peak demand historically is 56,000 gig. Now, we will cover that in a couple of other slides, but that's our benchmark. So what does this mean is the growth occurs. Right now, that's what we hit as historic peak back in 23 in the summer. We have a winter peak of 48,000. Ultimately, that has grown essentially over time with the implementation of the IS systems in 2015. So we are now, there is no break, really. There's a summer peak and a winter peak, and they are merging. So we're excited about that as well. So what about our resource mix? What you can see in this slide here is really just a diversity in the resource mix that we have. You'll see a number, you see a max and a minimum of the percentage of the footprint served by each resource that you have there, along with a total megawatt hour of production. Now, what you will notice is that it is natural resource heavy, right? Wind, essentially we're wind rich. We're really proud of that. There are times where we actually turn wind off, believe it or not. So that helps with the expansion, right? With more expansion is more load. We can leave the wind going, the cheap generation to serve the load that we have for the demand, and we can be green in that aspect. The variability in the resource mix is really something we're proud of. As you can see here, wind, coal, gas, nuclear, hydro, and some solar is really where we're positioned to grow with these large load demands that we have. So we're excited about that. So speaking of the generation side, what does that look like in the future? What we currently have in our GI study is 161 additional gig. And as you can see by the color bar in the circle there, that these also are green energy sources, right? We have solar and wind, a lot of battery, some thermal, and some hybrid. But that represents 161 gig in the queue. Again, we have 105,000 current today, 65,000 accredited. So this is a large increase that's just coming through the queue. So we're excited about that as well. But the variability is really what we want to stress. We are positioning ourselves, we think, to be able to respond to the larger loads coming through with some natural resources there. All right, before we get into some actual numbers here, really how real is this impending large load influx, right? I mean, there's a reason we're at a conference, right? The data center demands, all the studies that you'll hear, you really kind of get the impending doom feeling, right? What we have done, we're no different, and where we can cover some things real quick, is that what it looks like as far as historically for us, here we go. Historically for us in our attachment AQ process, and that's where we study load additions. Okay, so in the last 4 years, you'll see that there's an average of 8,100 megawatts coming through that to be studied. And we have a capture rate between 40 and 45%. So this is the dipping in the toe of the water, so to speak, right, of these entities that are coming along and saying, you know, hey, we have this large load. On the right-hand side of the graph, you see those that are greater than 100 megawatts. So those are coming as well, okay? So we have some historic capture of demand of this in our footprint. But what does that mean looking ahead? Why is this such a big deal, right? The demand is there. So how do we really position ourselves to best do that? The demand growth ahead. This, you've seen varying, I guess, instances of this graph. This is specific to our footprint and in our study, our load study process for load addition. Using Futures 1 and Futures 2, you can see that substantial growth is projected over the next 10 years. I'll remind you that our peak load currently is 56,000 megawatts, and upwards in the Future 2 for 2026, we're hitting 97.6 gigawatt. So that is a substantial increase in projected load growth. Okay. And as you see the slope of the line increasing as time goes on, there's just more and more coming, right? So the balancing act here is when you see those load projections, how do you balance transmission planning? That's one of the challenges and risks, right? I'm sure we'll cover some of that in more detail. How do you balance that before, to say, the slow-moving giant of transmission planning and transmission infrastructure build-out versus the quick little rabbit of market technology? How do you make that mesh? And that's one of the challenges we'll get to here in a little while. So the load of the future here, with all this data, you know, there was a need, of course, to be proactive in our policies and our approach to how can we capture and better position ourselves. You know, we're a footprint where we are stakeholder driven. We have these stakeholders with their needs, and they list out things, and they help us collaborate, and they help us drive policy and decisions to where we can drive out a better product together. So how do we better position ourselves for this large load impending issue? I can tell you a little bit about how we did it, but what we found is that through talking with stakeholders and all the different technologies and all participants and, you know, independent startups, all these different people, what we know for fact is that there is no one size fits all for large loads, right? These are some of the factors here that we've heard in direct discussions with businesses that operate in this realm. We have high load factors, data centers, right? We have low load factors. We have some thermal storage that really just say, well, I'll only need this transmission service maybe one every 3 days, and maybe for 6 hours at a time. The battery storage, all these things, like, you know, there's price sensitivity. They want to be able to pay for maybe what they use. Is that a possibility? How do you do that? You know, existing transmission constructs. There's a need for a monthly service. There's a need for long-term service. There's a need for firm service. There's a need for hourly service. So it's really the entire smorgasbord, I guess is a better word, of asks that are currently out there, right? So how do you address that as an RTO or ITO, or even an independent or a single transmission owner, transmission provider? There are too many asks. So how do you really do all that? We hit some of those questions yesterday. And, you know, as you'd mentioned earlier, there is no standard definition of what a large load is. There is no standard treatment for it. There are no standard operational constructs, right? So how do you get through that together with your participants? Always keeping in mind reliability is job one, followed closely by affordability, right? So those are the two pillars. How do you manage that through the process? So long story short, no one size fits all. So how is SPP proposing to implement, connect, and serve these large loads? That went dead. Okay, there we go. What we've done, and it was mentioned a little bit in my introduction, SPP has taken a proactive approach to listen to participants and their needs and some of the scenarios and business cases that they're hearing from these entities. And we've developed a Vanguard team, which is a team of very skilled people. I'm not sure how I got on it, but I'm certainly thankful to be there. But super skilled folks, engineering, planning, reliability, operations, legal, regulatory, settlements, executive level folks, right? And what we wanted to do is to be proactive and see how we can make a splash to solidify our participants' participation in the load growth, right? So the two main pillars that we had, as far as a theory would go, was really speed to market. How can we ensure speed to market? That is something we absolutely heard. But how do you balance that with reliability, affordability, and cost certainty, right? So we have all these technologies, all these generators who say, I can connect in X number of days. I can go super fast. Can you let me? Well, hang on. And that's kind of the position we're in now. We're all taking that step back, right? So how do you really develop the framework to address both immediate needs as well as your reliability concerns of long-term planning and operational constraints to where you know what's going on and you can ensure that you serve that next megawatt in line, right? So this is a slide some of you may have already seen before in some of the presentations we've had, but this is really our what we've created as far as the value proposition goes. And I'm just going to walk down as if it were a clock, okay? So the challenge that we were having, of course, and the issue with large loads in and of itself is the timing. It was a time to market issue. We have existing study processes from a planning aspect, and it'll be 180 days. If you're lucky, if you have all the things, there's no hiccups along the way. And that just didn't meet the business case for a lot of these clients. Lack of cost clarity. There was no defined structure for, let's say upgrades were needed. Well, how does that happen? Well, you're directly assigned, or what does that work? None of that was really stated out for some of these instances and these business cases that they had. So really what we're staring at is limited existing solutions. Okay, we wanted to solve that. So what we tried to do is come together and come up with the three pillars that we talked through. And what we're proud to say is that what we're suggesting and what we've pitched as far as stakeholder commitment goes is a 90-day connection study. Okay, that's super fast in case you didn't know. Path to connect your supporting generation for any load that you also want to bring in. We have a lot of different constructs from technology to say, well, I want to locate a lot of co-located gen, right? I want to put it in the same bus as a load. A lot of reasons to do that. Some can be over 2 buses away. A lot of reasons to do that. And what we've heard really is that there's a lot of different constructs that say, well, that almost fits me, but not quite. And here's why. So what we did is we took that into consideration with what we've developed, and I'll explain a little bit about that here in a little bit. And as always, as an RTO and ISO, we have the fiduciary responsibility to serve our stakeholders responsibly and economically. So the reliability aspect, again, is job one. What our solution is, we have had some products that we've developed, and I'll go through this in just a bit. But our solution is really this, what we're proud to say is the fastest connection study in the United States. That 90-day window with an asterisk, and I'll get to that in a second, that 90-day window to connect both generation as well as load in some instances is the fastest in the United States. There are flexible options that we can go through, and the interconnection cost clarity, we better and more clearly defined the cost aspects, the study deposit amount, your commitment per megawatt. What does it really mean to have skin in the game? To say, if you want this situation, this is what it will cost, and this is what we will do. Say what you mean what you say, and then follow through with it, right? So the results, really what we think we have is a product suite that can allow and kind of incent economic development within our footprint. We're allowing these large loads to say, within SPP's large geographic area, you can come here and within 90 days know that you can connect your gen. Know you can have options to connect your load, or here's the defined path to get you there. These are the costs that it will take to do that. And for that, we think we've really spurred, hopefully, some incentive to look at our geographic area for these large loads to locate. And I'll tell you about some of the discussions we've had that I think it's working, which is great. So we really want to be a leader in large load integration aspects, specifically from RTO ISO aspect. And ultimately what it does, it'll lead to load growth enablement. And as we all know, load pays basically everything. The more load you have to pay, the more those costs are socialized, right? So there is long-term impact to drive prices down. There are some short-term impacts to drive prices higher, and we'll cover that as well. But the long-term goal is to get these large loads as firm service, to where you can count them in your load base for your formula rate templates, your prior coincident peak amounts, to drive rates down. The larger denominator means lower prices. And that's really what we're after, okay? So what do we have? How do we get there? Well, maybe shocking some, we have actually created our definition of what a large load is. Now, let me take a step back. Large loads in and of themselves is kind of nebulous, right? It wasn't really defined. So we have defined this as a HILL, H-I-L-L, which stands for high impact large load. It could be large, but may have low impact. It can have a high impact, but may not meet a size requirement that would really cause concern with, right? So we've kind of defined the parameters as such on the screen, and this may be news, but I'll cover these in some detail, and we can take questions if it means anything. But really where we're saying, and we leaned heavily on those others who have given a definition, right? We were a little revolutionary, but we weren't totally out of the whack. So it's a new commercial or industrial load, or increase in commercial or industrial load, and I'll cover that in a second, at a single site connected through one or more shared points of interconnection or delivery points, okay? So really, it's attracting new load, or if you happen to have existing load that is slightly under these thresholds, and you have a growth in that load, or something that would project it over the threshold, then you could qualify to be a HILL. Now, when I say qualify to be a HILL, that means you would be required to go through the new tariff sections, the new operational requirements, the new service agreement, all the regulatory aspects that we need as an RTO and ISO to ensure that these are operating reliably and as expected. So what is that threshold I mentioned? There was some discussion yesterday, and I really appreciated it, to say, well, it kind of depends on where it is, right? And that's exactly right. There's so many aspects to these things to cover, but what we have said is that if the load is on a line that's 69 kV, less than or equal to the load, if it is 10 megawatts or greater, it is a high impact large load. So that's our defined threshold there. You think, well, that's not very big, but on a 69 kV line, it may absolutely be impactful enough to where you need to put these extra rigors on it, if that makes sense. Other than that, if the load is located on a line 69 kV or greater, the load must be 50 megawatts or greater in order to qualify to be called a high impact large load. Now, I mentioned some of the technologies that we've heard through, the thermal, the battery storage. We did limit this product to not include electric storage resources. And that's really a long operational discussion as far as the market design construct. I will summarize it, and you're welcome. I'll summarize it in the fact that ESRs, MSRs, the battery storage folks can ultimately pull megawatts from the grid. That's not a surprise, but they can get paid ultimately to do that, right? What we want to prevent by doing this is saying that ESRs are not eligible to be a HILL, because these HILLs could impact prices on the market side. So ESRs, by drawing megawatts from the grid, could actually be getting paid for an issue that they may be causing by driving up those prices. So we eliminated that option and said ESRs may not participate in the HILL program, okay? Now, there are strict requirements. I won't cover everything in great detail. We have strict, requirements for operational as far as in metering and regulatory aspects. All these things we can cover, but you must register in the market, clearly. We have to evaluate the load in either our attachment AQ or our provisional load process, which is our attachment AX. Now, a quick little shout out to our friends at SPP. Attachment AX and the provisional load process was recently approved by FERC last week, so we celebrate that. So this is an actual fact that I'm saying now to you. When I wrote this slide, it was in the air. We hadn't got approval yet, so yay for that. So what that means is that to get the delivery point to deliver to the load, what that does is it enables the load customer to, if you don't have any current designated network resources to serve your network load. right? That's a situation that you're in. You don't have generation. You can go, and if upgrades are necessary in order to serve your load, you will be directly assigned those costs until they are electrified. And at that point, they become base plant funded, which is where we socialize the cost amongst all load, right? So there's a benefit to get that generation there. And this is a program we're proud to say was approved by FERC and now is an option, okay? And you may be interested to know that SPP ride-through requirements compliance is absolutely part of this, both for high volt and low volt. And there is a specific paper that we note in one of the subsequent slides to say if you have any really detailed questions about that, both Yasir and Mustafa on the phone can probably answer those in text if you'd like them to, or we point you to a URL that'll get you to the document, okay? And then again, for the generation portion, the 90-day to get your generation hooked up, really what that means is that we're going to do our normal study processes, right? Transient stability, EMT screening. We're going to do some short circuit ratio and critical clearing time. Now that 90 days comes with an asterisk, obviously. That's a lot to do in 90 days to ensure reliability. Now what this means is, in order to hit the 90 days, we must have all information present. We must have visibility into the construct of the assets, visibility of how it operates, all the normal things that we would need through our study process. If we don't have that information, the 90-day clock does not start. Also, if within this 90 days, any of these studies show an issue, well, then the clock stops. And then it must go through the normal rigors of the longer process that we typically have, okay? So this 90-day asterisk is a fast path, provided you have all the ducks in a row when you give us the submission packet, and there are no issues that we see or fleshed out through the study process. Okay? Any questions so far? Okay, so what does this really mean when we get down to the products that we've talked about and that we've created? I'll spend a little time on this, and this is where I can veer. So please hold me to the time, right? There's a lot represented here that isn't shown, but we can absolutely spend time here if you'd like. What we've done in our creative freedom is that we've said, well, the Hill construct, high impact large loads, what it does is it is absolutely a necessity and it can absolutely serve some business cases. But what we've learned through participant conversations and interactions with these entities is that it didn't quite fit everybody. Again, not one size fits all. So we have created additional products and future additional products that we're working on in order to hopefully capture a larger audience for these large loads to be attracted into our footprint. So at first, the Hill, the high impact large load in and of itself, that is our, if you guys wanted to go to spp.org or research our RR filings or revision requests, that is RR 696. And it details, it's only about 580 pages of truly detailed stuff about the service agreement, the operational agreements, when we curtail, when we don't, how it all works. There are some new attachments, BA and BB, about adding that delivery point in the study process in and of itself, the study agreement, the service agreement. All of that is in there should you want to read through that. Again, that is RR 696. And this one has actually been approved by our board. So we're making this filing. We're super excited that to be an existing product that we can offer. The chill, the conditional Hill, what we found is that the Hill in and of itself didn't necessarily guarantee transmission service. So what about these large loads that want to interconnect the load side somewhat immediately in a way? So this is where we come across something that we called a conditional Hill or chill because we're super creative, right? So this is for large loads willing to take long-term curtailable transmission service, provided they make that commitment to be firm within the parameters of the time that we allow them. Okay, so this is that almost that there is a separate delivery point addition, which we have an attachment BC, which is in draft form. By the way, this is RR 720, which we actually discussed this morning at our MOPSI, again, stakeholder involvement. And we're going to try to keep pursuing this as a product. So that's great news. So I'm not going to lie to you guys right now. That's what that means. And really what that means is this is conditional. This does not have any generation linked to it. This is as available service. And you're like, well, what does that mean? Well, it means if we have excess megawatts on the system, these chill loads can be served. Okay. And a lot of you operators are probably going, your antennas are flickering now. Well, that's really risky. What do you do? There are additional parameters for reliability, operational requirements, stability. All those things are covered in the chill RR to say, this is when we will curtail you. We need to have clear understanding between both us and the transmission owner, transmission service provider to say, these are the parameters of when we will curtail these loads because they are as available. They are not as high priority as firm load. They will come off the system if they're causing constraints, if they're causing issues operationally. We will take care of that in operations. There's an asterisk there because we have to have purview into the situation, and we'll get to that in a second. So that's the chill load. The chill load is really as available, again, with a 5-year to 7-year commitment to allow for supply chain issues, really just in order to firm up that service. Because the goal here, again, is to get that firm service in your footprint, in your area, in your TSP area. Because, again, socialized costs, more load, lower cost to everybody, right? And that's what we're after here. So, again, in discussions with a lot of these technology startups for thermal and for battery storage, and there's hydro, there's everything that we've been talking through. We weren't quite fitting, again, a broad enough product suite to say, is everybody happy? Well, no. There are some folks that just weren't quite being served with either of these two products. So what we, again, went to the drawing board with is, again, a very unique acronym called PAL, which is Price Adaptive Load. Okay? Some of you on market design, this may pique your interest. This is really more of a non-firm load to where you have a bid cap of when you can participate to be served. Does that make sense? So when you make your bids into the market, the day-ahead market and the real-time market, we will establish, in theory, a cap to when you can participate. Because this isn't necessarily driven or linked to generation. So more demand with equal supply means prices on the market side will go higher. LMPs may go higher, congestion may be higher. We understand that as a market construct and we understand that as a risk. How we can mitigate that risk is to limit this product to a bid cap, meaning they cannot continue to drive prices higher once prices get to a certain level. The market day ahead in real time can continue to operate as normal with the other loads and the other constructs should it need to occur, but these PAL loads are now taken out of the equation. So that is one way we think we can mitigate the risk of driving prices higher until, no one's comfortable, no one wants that. So really, as far as the PAL product goes, really where I want to leave this is we're trying to be proactive, we're trying to be creative, think outside the box. There's a little phrase called green light thinking of how can you make this happen, right? And again, we're addressing this we're still determining what the parameters are. We have not written an RR for this. We have not written policy for this yet. We are still taking it back into the Vanguard team to say, how can this be something that we can offer in SPP's footprint? We're excited about it. We have a number of participants who are excited about it. This price adaptive load, also, we are thinking, again, no one hold me to this, all right, this is not in stone, and this is not a promise, but thinking even on the transmission side that this would be a pay-for-use product, not necessarily a reserved amount for megawatts, but more of a megawatt hour charge, if that makes sense. So again, there's a rate design aspect that you need to kind of cover in order to adhere to the transmission owner's responsibility or our responsibility to the transmission owners to make sure we recover their ATRR and give them the fiduciary duty of recovering for their assets that are being used. So there's a world of angles that we need to cover, and that's something that we're taking back to Little Rock to try to figure out. So we're excited about these 3 products. Again, one, the Hill, RR696, is approved and will be filed. Chill, RR720, I believe MOPSI went well today, we hope. So we will continue to pursue that. There may be some fine tuning there, and I'll keep you guys abreast of any changes. But then the PAL, price adaptive load, there is a lot of demand for that, no pun intended. But that is something that we are taking back in-house, working with participants to flesh out the details that needs to be there for reliability, affordability, and to meet their business needs. Okay? All right, so with that, I just kind of wanted to walk you guys through where we've been up to this point. Now it's been a whirlwind. It's been a whirlwind and a maze. It's been a lot of things. But at this point, I think we're going to talk about some risks and concerns.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Steve, for the detailed overview on SPP's load growth and sharing the solutions that that has been approved and some in development. Let's discuss some reliability risks and challenges and how SPP practices have evolved to mitigate those risks. So we are not going to let you go off this easy. We are going to talk about reliability risks and challenges here. And as we have seen that it crosses multiple areas. It crosses from interconnection, modeling, planning, operation, and regulatory risks. So I am going to say some risk statements, and I hope you can share what SPP practices have evolved into to mitigate those risks.
Okay. Just so
All
you'll
right.
know, this is not rehearsed. So, yeah.
All right. Next slide. So going into
that's my fault.
interconnection.
Here we go.
The size of large load interconnection queues and individual interconnection requests have increased significantly, exceeding historical norms, which presents new engineering challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. I touched on it a little before. It's really that balance, right? So from the interconnection process, like I mentioned before, the question that we're getting is how quickly can we plug in? People come to you and say, my business case is saying, well, I can connect now in a month. Is that available anywhere? And everyone says, no, it's not. So what we've done is created this 90-day study to get it connected in order to let us do the study and get it all done. That's called the HILGA process, another fun little acronym. That's the High Impact Large Load Generation Interconnection Agreement, right? So that is how we are getting that generation side addressed. So again, the HIL process in that 90-day period does address both the gen and the load side, which is super fast according to how things have been in the legacy world, right? So as far as interconnection goes, we do have, for the load side, existing processes in our tariff that kind of mitigate those in a quicker way. We have existing AQ. If you have existing designated network resources, again, the attachment AX, which is our provisional load process, if you do not have your designated network resources, you can get them through the AX process, right? And there's cost allocations for that. If you choose to have chills service, and we get that approved as well, you can then connect your load to get it served while all this is going on. So that's incredibly attractive for these. But as far as mitigating the queue in and of itself, all we can do is really think through where might be gaps in our study process, in our interconnection process. How do we ensure reliability is still job number one? How do we have insight into the construct, insight into the assets that are being used to where we can make the best decision to ensure that reliability that we need, along with the affordability, and to where we get the stakeholders need taken care of. There are some things here on the screen. I won't read it all to you guys, but as far as the short circuit ratios being absolutely considered, critical clearing time, the EMT model is taken into case. All of that is being adapted for these high impact large loads, okay? For a hill, if we can just use that and not make me say all the words again, we will be asking for a 10-year annual demand forecast. So forecasting comes along. Planning reserves comes into play. All of these aspects that you would expect are absolutely in play here, but they're accelerated with a heightened sense of security on reliability. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And it is so important that you're discussing these points because as an RC, we would be a lot of local transmission owners, local planners would be looking up to an RC and RTO to get inspired, to get a sense of what they can do locally in their area with regard to sharing and getting more information that will support your study process.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'll just drive this point home. You'll probably hear me say it multiple more times, but visibility into the situation is absolutely critical to the success and how we would operate that, right? We must know exactly the construct, what assets are being used, when, what are the planned demands, what are the planned generation, how is it all going to work into place so we can make sure we mitigate any risks to wear that hat.
All right. Yeah. So moving on to the next reliability risk on modeling. Limited understanding of large loads precludes the creation of models, which prevents accurate studies to justify the need for additional mitigating measures.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, so the model in itself is this huge complex beast, and I know we're all familiar with all that, but we have two separate models working at SPP, the electric model and the commercial model, of course, different. One's driving for settlements, one's driven for really engineering studies and process and planning. This will focus on that one, right? So how do you really ensure that reliability with the speed to market that we're after, right? So again, it's really purview into the situation. We have to know how this will operate, how it's going to do. We will have modeling requirements that we put in. We put strict modeling requirements for these load to transact in our footprint in RR 696, so much so that each asset must be metered independently. Revenue quality metering, guys. As far as in each asset metered independently, there are a number of reasons for that, right? So let's assume chills is passed and is the service that they're taking. There are a number of ways where chills is limited because A, it's curtailable, right? So it can come and go. But then if there are operational characteristics as well to limit their use of the chills, to say, if we tell you to curtail and you don't, well, that's unreserved use, and that's in the tariff. Right? And bam, now you're paying twice the rate you wanted to do. No one really wants to operate that way. If we tell you to curtail and you don't, well, then we have breakers, right? So, I mean, long and short of it is, it can go away, right? And that is our duty and something that we promise to adhere to, just to ensure reliability, because that's our job, right? Again, the bottom here is really what I wanted to kind of ensure that you guys knew. You guys know that anyway, right? SPP is a player in all the national working groups, ESIG, EPRI, really just to make sure we meet the requirements for planning that they adhere to as well.
All right. So before we move on to the next one, I wanted to take an opportunity for a quick plug for our upcoming 2-day WEC EMT strategic workshop in November. It's going to be held in person in Salt Lake City offices from November 19 to 20. So registration is open for EMT model workshops. So please, I highly encourage you to look into that announcement and register if you have availability.
Okay.
All right. So next is planning related risks and challenges. Serious discrepancies exist between large load interconnection request timelines and the ability to build BPS infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're picking up what I'm putting down. So that's something that I mentioned before a couple of times, right? The old analogy of, the giant, slowly walking his way through the villagers, and there's the rabbit bouncing around his ankles like he's a clown, right? So that's really the difference in the dichotomy of transmission planning and infrastructure build out. That is a slower process. That is years most of the times. These technology advances in the market side to where these loads and generators can come onto the system far outpace the pace of the transmission can adapt to it. So what is that balance, right? As far as planning goes, we have to adhere our planning cycles to say, when we know when the load's coming here, we need to ensure that if we do any transmission infrastructure build out, that we don't create stranded costs, for example, right? That is one of the risks and challenges that we talk through. So stranded costs would be maybe a load shows up for a short time and upgrades are being built in order to serve the load, but then the load disappears. Well, the existing infrastructure is still being built, still being paid for by the footprint, and that is a stranded cost because the load disappeared. What we have done to mitigate some things like that, you may be interested to know, is that what we've done is we've put a lot of skin in the game from these loads in the beginning. The study process has a high financial cost. In order to get the study process, there's a commitment cost as well. And then again, depending on the construct and really what they're asking, there's a scaled increased fee associated to do the studies and get it interconnected. So what we think that ensures that they have skin in the game to where they're ensuring that they are sticking around for the long term, because again, all of this is in the design in the mind to say, we want you to be long-term firm load. in the footprint. That's the reliability angle. We want to count on you when you're there. So that's just one way to kind of help that along. We again, how do you merge that with the 90-day study? Well, that just really puts the pressure on those study processes to flesh out any issues, any errors. We know that's a huge responsibility. We think we can accommodate that, again, if all the information is given to us at the start and any of the steps along the way don't show any issues for reliability for anywhere else. I will go ahead and say that the load planning side, the local TU also needs to do the load connection study as well. There are some owners still owned by the other entities in this. This is not just an SPP show. Of course, we work with our participants. They need to do their job in the interconnection study as well. And then, gosh, what else can we hit? We're still evaluating a lot of other things. I don't want to make promises here, but this is, we know we have constructs of like co-location. We've given 2 separate options within the Hill. Here's a tidbit. Within the Hill RR, to where there's 2 separate constructs that we can allow in that. We originally had 3, but the stakeholders didn't like the 3rd one. So guess what happened? It went away, right? That's how it works, right? So we are allowing co-located generation at either a common bus construct, the same point of interconnection, or the same local area, which can be up to 2 buses away. So think through that as these assets, configurations can be played with, because the technology is out there, guys, and you will hear all kinds of questions about, what if we do this? How do we do that? What if this is over here? All of that will be considered in the study process.
Yeah, it is really important to have that, like, even if you do not have fully fleshed out of processes identified or practices identified, it's important to have that dialogue keep on going on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Again, here I am again saying visibility, right? That's why we require the metering at each asset, right? Because there is some co-supply, and there can be. One of the things with the chills product is that you can bring some generation. And if you do bring generation with your chill load, your conditional high impact large load, we call that supporting generation. And what that does is, from the curtailable aspect and the market impacts, is we look at that as a combined and netted impact, only from the impact for curtailability from market aspect, right? Because we know if we say, hey, your load is uncovered, meaning you're unsupported by generation behind the same point of interconnection, then you're truly relying solely on the grid to be served, right? Those uncovered or unsupported loads will be curtailed first, in essence, for reliability. But then we have the net impact angle on those that do have co-located generation, because ultimately, if we curtail you down a couple megawatts, you're probably going to kick up the gen and get rid of, serve the rest yourself, right? So we understand that. So we're looking at that from an operational reliability aspect of a net impact onto the grid when we make our decisions for curtailment. Just another little tidbit. So yeah.
Yeah. So I think the next one, participants would be interested in knowing the real-time operational risk and challenges.
Yeah.
So the first major disturbance on the grid that involved data centers occurred in 2024. The incident report is available on our website. Like IBR integration, it is clear that grid disturbances and reliability issues involving large loads can follow similar trajectory. What do you have to say to operational concerns like that?
Well, first, we need to take them very seriously, because they are there. And we all know the vulnerabilities that come with adding these large loads at a single interconnection point, and the things that can happen, right? So we take that extremely seriously. So we have built in operational guidelines that must be adhered to as far as the tariff goes. Of course, within our footprint, everything operates within the tariff rules parameters. Else, there's FERC filings, there are unreserved use penalties, there are operational penalties that we will enforce, right? So really how that works is, how do you really handle the fluctuations? How do you handle non-conforming? We require non-conforming load forecasts. There may be things like ramp rate restrictions that we can cover. We had an initial thought of maybe 20 megawatts, but it wasn't quite fitting the need. So that is yet to be determined exactly what they'll specifically be. That will come out in the RR exactly when it comes through. So really, it's just, there are a lot of technological angles that we need to have enforceability on in the operational world. Now, we do have some things listed here. That part was rehearsed as far as how do we answer that, because some of these documentations, I'll point now to the ride-through performance, right? That's the fourth one down. The SPP Hill ride-through requirements manual has been prepared, and we can link you to that should you want to explore that as well. There's another power quality studies, right, that were kind of now required by us in the Hill Delivery Point Studies Manual, which is another documentation we can point you to if you want to explore that further. This is I think probably the main risk that we would have, because in operational risk that we have is we just need to make sure that we're serving load, right? We don't want to cut anybody off. We don't want to disconnect any service, but when we need to have clear parameters of when we will do what and who is vulnerable when. We need to be clear about that and then operate with those guidelines. Make sure you're having good communication, right, with your local TSPs, with your local TOs, your load responsible entities, to have that communication for when we give a directive, we know who it's going to, and they know what to do with it when the time matters. Okay, this could be a 2-hour discussion in and of itself. We fully realize that, but again, reliability is job one. We have put parameters in a sandbox in there to say that we have absolute operational control within our footprint RBA, and we will operate it just like that.
Thank you. And lastly, next slide, we have the regulatory risks and challenges. So as we have seen and heard in the past 2 days, these large load customers are not required to be registered with NERC. They do not have to follow any NERC reliability standards because there aren't any. And there isn't a lot of directly related standards, mandatory standards for existing entities registered in WEC that they can work towards large loads studies and planning and you know, in like reliability standards directly dictating some of those risks and challenges. So in that scenario, what can the local owners and operators and planners can do?
Well, shameless plug, you can join an RTO, right? So we do have functional control of all the assets in the footprint. That is part of the membership agreement. So shameless plug SPP, control, right? That's good. Absent that, we do have an understanding and empathy for the situation to say, will they do what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it, right? You have that worry, right? But how we have mitigated that is we, again, put strict restriction guidelines in the tariff language. So once you're in the tariff, you know how you're going to operate, or you know what we will do in order to ensure that you are being reliable. Now, in that light, though, I did put this on the very bottom here, jurisdictional compliance. And this is something that we've gotten a really good response from. A lot of the questions we had when we started talking about large loads and all these pop-ups or startups about all these new technologies, and they're coming from everywhere with different technological advances and different constructs. We, within our RTO footprint, are saying, in order to be a high-impact large load, to get Hill or Chill service or even PAL, you must bring those requests to us through the entity that is authorized to transact in the state. We are not usurping any jurisdictional boundaries. We are not, going around any commissions. We are working with them collaboratively to ensure that these requests, these service agreements, must come through the membership, right? So that's given some great comfort to our participation base to say, the load itself can't just show up, right, without them knowing, because that was their concern. What if they just show up and I don't know about it? Oh, well, we can ensure that because we make them go through you in collaboration with that. We just need to make sure that you're doing your best to try to get them on as well. So, and then again, as mentioned before in the introduction, SPP we have membership on these task forces here at the NERC level, in the large groups in the industry, and we really try to be collaborative in that and lend ourselves to drive a better product, if that makes sense, to where we also stay in the loop to say this is best industry practice. There are no defined terms for this right now, and we understand that. We've made some decisions, and we have our products that we've created and the scenario that we would allow in our footprint. and we will file that at FERC and we'll see what they say, right? If they approve it, we'll put it through the tariff and our practices and we'll go from there. Otherwise, we'll all learn together and we'll go back to the drawing board if this doesn't work. We have pretty good confidence though.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for the wonderful introduction of SPP's process on the planning, the demand forecast, the load forecasts, market products, and reliability risks. And here's the contact details for Steve Davis, should you have any questions. And I just wanted to take opportunity for coming to San Diego and providing this wonderful presentation.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yeah, your communication. So you don't have a question, do you? I must have eaten the entire time, but I'll take any questions if you have them. There's a lot of detail here. If you get the slides, there are some URLs in there to link to some of the RRs and some of the documents that we referenced. So please use that. And if you find yourself any questions after we're gone, that's my contact information, or Yasir and Mustafa are online as well, and they will probably do a much better job of explaining things to you than I will. So, question? Yes, sir.
Urs Gesier from Ferrovial. I was wondering, on one of your slides, you were indicating that you would consider in the future temporary use of grid enhancing technologies to overcome the supply chain issue. Could you add some color and flavor what that actually means or how you approach it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, what that meant to indicate is just really a nod to all the different varying technologies that we're seeing in these constructs. So supply chain issues that may be prevalent with existing normal transmission infrastructure or asset constructs. People may have batteries on hand. People may have thermal storage devices on hand, right? So the more available the technology is as a solution, the more opportunity you have to get that implemented quicker. Meaning, and I should have said this earlier, the HIL and the CHIL product. The CHIL product is only for high impact large loads, but there's a 7-year window, right, to where that load must be firmed up in order to allow for things like supply chain issues, right, and the technology advances that we need. We know we had a start 5-year limit when we first drafted this. Through stakeholder participation and feedback, that grew to 7 years to say, well, sometimes, we can't quite get what we need to get to make this thing happen. So it's a 5 to 7 year window in order to firm up your service, in order to allow supply chain issues to be resolved, for example.
So the fact that it's temporary, it's bridging the 5-7 years. Is that what you mean with temporary?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It tries to fill the gap to adhere to and just make more of an understanding of there could be supply chain issues in order to give you that larger window. Provided you're making steps of commitment along the way, we will give you that extended time. Yes. Thank you. That's all the time we have. Hey guys, they're yanking me. So if I haven't met you